Wendy Kopp, who is the founder of Teach for America and currently the CEO of Teach for America and also Teach for All. So a small introductory address by her.
Well, that was my voice there, really talking about the disparities in education in the United States, which exist so much along socioeconomic lines. I'm not sure the direct relevance to Estonia, where the nature of the problem is slightly different. But nonetheless, maybe it gets us in the right zone. I thought I would share, first of all, it's wonderful to be here in Estonia, to have a chance to be out in your schools and talk with the Noored Kooli participants and alumni, which has already been inspiring and thought-provoking. I'll just share a couple of minutes about what brought me to this in the first place, I guess a little over 20 years ago now, and what brings me now to Estonia and to other countries around the world, and what leads my colleagues and I in this effort to feel really just a greater sense of urgency and a greater sense of possibility than ever before. Just quickly, I came to this when I was a college senior. I was a student at Princeton in 1989 as a college senior, and our generation was called the me generation. You know, supposedly we just all wanted to go make a lot of money. And I thought that label was misplaced, you know. I felt like I was one of thousands of graduating seniors who were just searching for a way to make a real difference in the world. And I just thought the problem wasn't the generation, it was the recruiters. And one day thought, why aren't we being recruited as aggressively to commit 2 years to teach in our nation's highest poverty communities as we were being recruited at the time to commit 2 years to work in investment banking. So that was the initial inspiration, and I needed a thesis topic and decided to propose this in my thesis. And through that process, just became all the more convinced that this could make a huge immediate impact in the lives of kids by channeling all of that talent and energy that was good enough for the firms on Wall Street into classrooms in our most under-resourced communities. And at the same time, I thought that there would be a kind of long-term power to this. If we could get our future leaders to have their first 2 years out of college be teaching in high-need communities. Instead of working on Wall Street, I thought that would change our priorities and our consciousness and our decision-making and ultimately the fundamental state of affairs in our country. This idea was very quickly far beyond me. It magnetized thousands of people even in the first year to either apply or support the effort or decide to hire the teachers. And now in the United States, you know, 21 or 2 years later, you know, this year 50,000 people applied to Teach for America. 18% of Harvard's senior class, you know, are competing to commit 2 years to teach in urban and rural public schools. 15% of my alma mater. If people had said 20 years ago that 15% of Princeton's senior class would be vying to channel their energy in that direction, no one would have believed it. But we have been able, in a way, to build a movement among the future leaders in our country to say, you know, all kids in our country should have the chance to attain an excellent education. We currently, in the US, have about 8,000 teachers in the midst of their 2 years, teaching across the 40 kind of highest need urban and rural regions in the country. There are, you know, multiple evaluations that show that they are, you know, at least as successful, in fact, more successful even than veteran teachers in their schools. And I think what surprised many is that of our 20,000 alumni, people who for the most part really weren't planning to go into education or teaching. You know, they were just doing this for 2 years before they went to law school or med school or went to those corporate corporate recruiters in the end, and yet 65% of them are working full-time in education. Of the other half, or of the other 35%, about half are working maybe in medicine, but in urban areas, or maybe in policy, but in ways that impact low-income communities or education. So it's truly proven to be a transformational experience for the teachers themselves. I think, you know, what this video attempted to bring to life is the progress that's been made, and certainly the work that remains to be done in education in the last 20 years in my country. And certainly the Teach for America alumni have been at the center of that progress. It's not to take the full credit at all, it's just that if you took all the Teach for America alums out, you would see a lot less progress in the last 20 years. And I thought I would just try to capture the most, I guess, salient lessons in the US context, and then say a couple. I mean, we've spent our last 4 years supporting social entrepreneurs around the world in such diverse contexts who have been working to build the movement in their countries to address educational need. And what's been most, I guess, almost surprising to me has been the universals that we see in this issue. So many of the salient lessons in our first 20 years seem to resonate so deeply across such diverse contexts. So let me, you know, because we have a whole panel and I want to let them, you know, bring this here to Estonia, so I'll try to be brief, but let me start by saying that the most salient lesson of the last 20 years for us is that we actually can truly solve the problem, meaning we can reach a point where all kids have the kind of education that enables them to fulfill their true potential. And I say that, you know, this book, A Chance to Make History, that finally is, you know, has finally been published, which I wrote, takes its title from one of our teachers who finished her 2 years last year in the South Bronx, one of the highest poverty communities inside New York. And she walked into her classes of 112 ninth graders and said to them, "This is your chance to make history." Her kids were all living below the poverty line. They had all learned English as a second language. 20% of them were reading 3 years behind in terms of their reading levels, and all of them, almost all of them were significantly behind. They'd had very little exposure to science. And our teacher, Megan, was supposed to teach them biology. And she thought a long time about, you know, what was she going to try to accomplish with her kids during the year that she had them that would make a difference in their lives. And she decided, you know what, I'm going to charge my kids with the goal of taking and passing a very rigorous New York State Regents exam in biology. Few kids in the Bronx do that, and if you do that, people think you're on a college track. And so she thought if her kids could do that, they would prove to themselves and to others that they could do college level material, and that would, you know, have the chance to change their trajectory. And she went to extraordinary lengths to get her kids on a mission toward that goal. She convinced them that if they worked hard enough, they would get there, and if they got there, that would make a difference in their lives. And I would go visit her classroom, and you feel a sense of urgency in her room. Like, this is a teacher on a mission. She's thought so deeply about how to maximize every second she has with her kids to move them from one point to another. She realized she didn't have enough time because her kids were so far behind, so she figured out how to get them there early and keep them late, and get them to come to school on Saturdays. She had 75% of them coming every Saturday. And a year in, 112 of her students, every one of them, passed this exam with an average passing rate 10 percentage points higher than New York City's average. So what Megan shows us is that when kids are met with high expectations and the supports that they need to meet their needs, they excel and excel on an absolute scale. And I think she shows us in the microcosm of her classroom that we can solve the problem. of course, I mean, I love this title that was up here before, From Great Teachers to an Excellent Education, because the real question, you know, when you listen to Megan's story, maybe you're thinking this as well, like, how many Megans? You know, in the US, it's overwhelming. We can't have 10,000, thousands and thousands, you know, hundreds of thousands of Megans making up for the extra challenges facing the kids and the weaknesses of the system to get to produce those results. Ultimately, we have to change the system itself. And per the video, what we've seen in the last 20 years is that we can. We can create whole schools that make it much easier for talented, committed teachers, but not superheroes like Megan's, to attain those kind of results. And we can, in fact, by deeply understanding what Megan is doing and what's happening in those schools, affect system-level changes that have a meaningful difference for kids. So one of the things I think we've learned is that we really can ultimately solve the problem. The other thing I think we've learned is just the power of leadership in accomplishing that end. Megan is an extraordinary leader. When you think about what she did, she operated like the most successful leaders anywhere. Set a vision of where her kids would be at the end of the year, motivated her kids to get there, worked with great purpose, did whatever it took to reach that goal. And when you really start understanding what's happening in the now hundreds of very high-performing schools in urban and rural areas in our country, you realize that always there's a school leader who knows what Megan knows because they themselves were a transformational teacher as she was, and as a result, deeply believe in their kids, know what they have the potential to do, and will say, I'm going to get my kids on a path to get into and graduate from college. And then they operate with the kind of energy and discipline and an approach that any successful leader takes to reach those extraordinary outcomes. When you look at what's happening in school systems that are making meaningful progress at a system level, again, there are people in driving those changes who also are great leaders, who deeply believe in their kids, who have the foundational experience of having taught successfully. So that is what, drives the people at Teach for America to try to get bigger and better, and it's what inspires these social entrepreneurs from all over the world to say, we need to channel our country's future leaders against the problem of educational need, which is our country's most fundamental problem. So what the last thing I'll just say is, and some of this I'll leave to imagination, but kids are kids. Successful teaching is, at some level, successful teaching. School systems, the parallels across all these countries, it's almost overwhelming to see how many universals exist despite the number of differences that also exist. And that's what gives me optimism that we will all be able to learn from each other, that ultimately we'll be able to build these movements in all these different countries, from Estonia to the United States to China to South Africa, that are learning from each other and accelerating each other's movements so that we can have a world in which there's expanding educational opportunity and decreasing educational disparities. So, back to you.
Thank you, Wendy. I'm a bit ashamed that you just sat down, because I would like you to take a seat on one of those orange chairs right now. We are about to begin our panel discussion, and Wendy is one of the panelists here, so pick a seat. I have reserved this one for myself. Okay, and the second member of our panel will be Marko, who was a teacher in the Noored Kooli program, and he is currently the deputy headmaster of Raatuse Gymnasium in Tartu. So, Marko. Another member of our panel is Artur, who is one of the founders of Noored Kooli and currently the vice president of Teach for All. So, welcome. The fourth member of our panel is Mr. Toomas Kruusimägi, who is the headmaster of Tallinn English College and the president of the Estonian School Heads Association. And finally, Mr. Aivar, who is member of the board of the Estonian Parents Association. Welcome. My name is Marko. I was a teacher with Noored Kooli as well, and I will be moderating this discussion. As I said earlier, we have 3 points of order that we would like to discuss in a mere amount of 1 hour. So we would like to address teachers in classrooms, how teachers, good teachers in classrooms can translate to good schools, and how we can get success from schools and get that on the whole education system and the whole level of the educational system. So here we go, let's see. The first thing I would like everyone to do is think of one teacher that you had with whom you had a very positive experience. It can be for whatever reason, but one teacher and how this affected you and what was that positive. Maybe Marko could start because I guess you're the youngest here. Besides me, of course.
I must say that the first teacher who came to my mind when you posed the question is not a teacher from a school, but is my wife. And I think she's a person who's taught me many things about me as a person. And I would like to start from there actually, although the wider context why we're here is the school system and the educational system. But I think finally, all things said and done, what we're after is very friendly, creative and forthcoming persons.
Okay. Anyone else? Have someone ready? Artur, you look like you have a person in mind.
Yeah, so I went to a school in Tallinn, which was initially called Secondary School number 7, and now is Tallinn English College. And I think until I was 13 or 14, I was really most just into sports. I mean, I used to play table tennis and football every day, and I wasn't really so much into learning. And then it was, I think, in 9th grade. My friend Marko, who is here today as well, we had this exchange program with the school in London, and he had just been in London for 3 months and basically said that this is really, like, this is the most exciting thing I've done in my life, and you should really try to get into this program next year. So that was the initial impetus, and then the next year. Most of our school, I think, was still, at the time, I mean, it was very much, like, everyone was working hard, but it was about, I guess, just still, like, memorizing things. And there was one teacher, I think, in particular, who focused and helped us to think, I think, and to communicate. And that was a really big change for me in 10th grade. And he's actually sitting next to me right now. I don't want to... So Toomas is now the headmaster of the school, but I just want to say, like, among other teachers who I think have really changed my life, I think you were one of them. So I just want to say a big thank you.
So I think it might be prudent that you share your examples.
Yeah, what I've got to say is that some wise guy has once said that if a person has one good teacher in his life or her life, he's a lucky man. Obviously, you all are. I have learned a lot, actually. The person who ignited the thirst for knowledge in me and expanded my horizon of the world and the knowledge here is a former tutor of mine. The rest of the teachers who have motivated me most and university lecturers are the ones who gave me the example how not to behave, how not to teach, how not to interact. And My question is that I've got to bear in mind this and that not to use in my life or not to do certain things, which I find not the most effective ways of communicating and being in that process. So, but I've got one person who has ignited this thirst for knowledge, and I believe that's enough.
This is actually one of the things we discussed when planning this panel discussion, that we should find out the positives because there are so many negatives. So very good.
A negative thing could teach you as well. So.
It can teach you, but we would really like to know how. So that was very good. Aivar, you as a parent.
I'm a happy man. I have 3 excellent teachers, and those are my kids. My children, 12, 10 and 4 years. And they gave me opportunity or possibility to understand who I am, who I really am. Am I a teacher who can talk, who knows how it has to be, or I'm a person who is following my words and doing things. And that was most important for me.
Absolutely. Wendy, would you share one experience?
I'll be brief and say Mrs. Fish, 7th grade English. I thought I wrote well, but I guess she didn't think so. And she just pushed and pushed and pushed and never stopped pushing, and I guess I wrote a lot better by the end of the year.
Okay.
High expectations.
Higher expectations, of course. So what we've heard now is that we like teachers who make us think about ourselves and who we are, and inspire us in general. Then again, Wendy just brought out pushing the students and having high expectations. How do we find a balance between this? How do we find a balance between getting good exam results and showing a child a good educational experience?
Well, just to be clear, we didn't even have standardized tests that were a factor back then. I mean, I'm not that old, but we didn't have, she wasn't worried about standardized tests. I think she was driving at critical thinking and good writing and truly trying to make sure that all of her students got a truly good education, but beyond that, that each of us were kind of met where we were and pushed to get to a higher level, so that we each fulfilled our true potential.
Okay. Any other ideas on this? Because I thought that we have these experiences. We have a few good teachers. Toomas said if you have one, then you've been lucky. But we would like to have more, wouldn't we? How do we get most of the teachers to be inspiring? Because this is why we're here. We want to change teaching. We have a few examples, but how do we make the other ones become better? If you have a definition of better, because it can be very different, I expect. Well,
I think we have to find ways how to support the teachers and encourage them to work on themselves. I think for me it starts from there. We talk a lot about pushing our students and setting high standards, but I think ultimately you can push them only so far as you can push yourself. I don't know if you would agree, but at least I find it true about myself. I can teach only the things that I really know inside out, and also setting a personal example. You can't do that if you are not that person yourself. But then this is a very personal issue in a way, because we're all different. So how do you create an organization or a system which would encourage and support teachers to work on themselves? Just a question, but I think this is the key, because I see a lot of good teachers who expect the students to work hard and who are pushing the students, but who have along the way, I think, forgotten about pushing themselves. and I'm included sometimes. It's a work you have to do day by day.
I very strongly believe in the fact that it all depends on the goals and visions and aims. I believe in the fact that good standardized test results or exam results are only by-product, if we may say so, of good learning. And I would reverse the focus from teaching to learning, which is an interaction in the classroom. And very good learning happens when the people have thought over and answered the question, why? And if you are really knowledgeable about why you're doing things, then comes the motivation, the sparkling eyes, the enthusiastic cooperation in and outside the classroom, and good results for life.
But you as a headmaster, how do you do it? I mean, do you tell your teachers every morning that please ask the students the question why? How do you get the teachers to do this? Because naturally this is what we want.
A teacher is a leader, and every organization should have a vision. So we have a vision, we communicate that, we talk about it, we discuss, and every teacher has a vision, should be there. So if you have a vision, and then the next key element is to have the right people who are motivated, who want to do the thing, who share this vision and are keen on working towards that vision.
I would just add something around values and mindsets. I think it's something we're trying to create definitely with Noored Kooli, and I think something that the best schools are creating is just thinking about teachers, how they approach their work, and really believing in every single child that they can learn. I think that's where it really starts from, and I've been reflecting, I think, over the past day and few days, and obviously what's the and even when the sort of the film that we saw earlier, what are the specific lessons to our specific problems in Estonia? And obviously there are differences, big differences between Estonia and the US and other countries that are part of Teach for All, and the inequity, I think, between the best schools and the worst schools in Estonia, it just isn't as big. There are less schools in Estonia that are completely failing their students, but I think in almost all schools in Estonia there are students who basically the teachers just don't seem to really believe in them, and when you have teachers who've basically given up on their students and given up that they can learn, and then you can have all kinds of excuses. You can have the excuse that they're not these kids come from families that don't really support education, like the education of their child, or don't value education. These kids have no motivation at all. I think that's one of the core issues, which I think is actually very similar in many classrooms in Estonia. And so that's the main thing, creating a culture where you really do believe that every child can learn, and the teacher takes responsibility for making sure that the kids really develop their full potential.
I think a number of teachers, it becomes a vicious cycle, most people go into teaching because they do believe in the kids. And then, what they see in their classrooms challenges their assumptions, and I think the truly effective teachers, I couldn't agree more with the headmaster's point, step back and take the time to ask themselves, what am I going to do this year that will make a meaningful difference? That was the question that differentiated Megan. She told me she thought for 3 weeks about that question before the school year started to try to figure out what could she do. This was a situation, what could she do that would make a difference? It was because she figured out, here's what I'm gonna do, and then went about getting her kids, who anyone else looked at and thought, these kids are all over the place. Like, they're not motivated, they're not learning, they're so far behind, clearly there are deficits. She just thought to herself, okay, I'm gonna spend half my time and energy getting to know my kids and convincing them to get on this mission. And even in the classrooms, I mean, we spent some time in classrooms today, and I watched really committed, hardworking teachers try to move their kids forward and talk to, I mean, a whole range of folks, but, and listen to people say, just can't, get my kids motivated, and they're working hard, and probably all of us would sit in the back and say, I don't know what I would do differently, but it's the building blocks, it's once you have your kids working with you, because you've convinced them that smart isn't something you're born or not, like it's something you work hard to become, and that if you work hard enough, you'll get there, and that will make a difference for whatever reason, convincing the kids to work with you, getting them on the same mission that you're on, that's the differentiator in my mind based on everything I've seen of true greatness, and I do think there's a lot that's relevant, probably in any context.
In the Estonian context, we have teachers. Our teachers are, on average, quite old, and there are many good teachers, but the issue is, how do we get them to ask that question from themselves before the school year begins? Because we have many teachers that obviously don't. We have teachers who think that some kids just cannot do some things, and do not set high expectations for them. Is it retraining? Teachers go to their retraining sessions all the time.
I believe this is a school problem and not a teacher problem. So I'll just say that. I mean, and I'm talking too much, and I should, but I visited a school, again in the Bronx, maybe 3 weeks ago, and it was a school that 3 years ago was one of New York City's lowest performing schools. And one of our alumni had taken on the principalship of this school. And it's now recognized in the top category of New York's, accountability system. They've made dramatic progress, despite a very high need. 40% of the kids are special needs in this school. So there are 370 kids in the school and 31 faculty members. As he put it, when he took over the school, some of the faculty members had been alive had been teaching in the school longer than he'd been alive, 30-year veterans, okay? He had many teachers who taught more than 20 years in the school. Now, just think to yourselves, how many of those teachers do you think are still there today? The school has undergone a radical transformation. How many teachers do you think are different? What do you think? Just take a wild guess.
How many of them are still there?
Yeah, what percentage of the faculty are the same? I mean, the school went from lowest performing to highest performing.
30, 20?
You get where I'm going. He switched out 2 teachers. He said, we had a lot of ineffective teaching, and he's still working on some of those teachers. It's not a perfect picture. But the problem wasn't the teachers per se, it was that there had never been a vision set. There was a dysfunctional culture. There was no team. There was no management going on. And I think, I guess I've come to see the solution as, we need to create better schools. And in order to create better schools, we need school leaders who will set a vision and have the capacity to build the team and build the culture and manage effectively and whatnot. I don't know how you all would see that here, but.
So, to me, this is very interesting because it seems to me that in Estonia, mostly people consider, when they think about teachers using more modern measures to teach kids, they think about retraining. But I like the idea of starting from the top down in school because if the same teachers can do the job, it seems to me that retraining isn't the answer, but good leadership might be. So this is quite interesting. But yeah, go on.
Just one simple idea as well that I saw in the school that I visited. So I now work for Teach for All. We've got 19 countries that do similar programs like Noored Kooli and Teach for America. And so I'm lucky to be able to go to lots of these schools in different countries. And one of the things that I think is really has been just interesting to see is just like the classroom doors just being open in many of the best schools, and you create a culture where it's okay for teachers basically to share like their challenges, and they talk to each other, and a lot of it's sort of constant learning is just part of the fabric, I think, of the best schools. And I think in many of the schools in Estonia, you close the classroom door, and that's your castle, and like no one's going to come in. And if someone is going to come in, then you're ready for that, and you can prepare yourself, and you can put up a show. But yeah, so I agree that I think the sort of culture that is within a school, I think, makes a big difference. And Open Doors is just like one tiny example of that.
I can confirm that from personal experience. When I was a young teacher, teachers weren't very much interested in me going to their lesson and taking a look or anything. But before we move on, there was one point that Artur brought out about parents supporting their kids. You say that kids from the Bronx, for example, they didn't have that much support, or parents didn't set high expectations for them. This is one of the similarities that we can bring out about Estonian school systems and the US. And this was one of the main problems where the hardest kids to deal with were the ones whose parents weren't very interested in their progress.
I mean, can I just clarify, because I hope I didn't, I don't know if I said exactly that, because I think the reality is, it's just the kids are growing up in our context, in a community where they're not seeing evidence that if they work hard, it will change their lives. I mean, even if they work hard, the status quo is, even if they graduate from high school, and half of them won't, they'll have an 8th grade skill level, and that doesn't get them anywhere. So they don't see, there's not a culture of, well, of course you go to college. Like, no, they don't see the path. And it's not that their parents don't care, it's that they just truly don't know what to do. I mean, they themselves, this is a cycle of poverty. They didn't get a good education, and so it's, I think what we've found, and what the Megans of the world do, is reach out to the parents, and she reached out to all of them and said, here's the deal. If you work with me, we're going to get your kid on track to college. And let me tell you, she would say she had the most motivated parents of any teacher in the Bronx. She had her parents bringing the kids, making sure they were there every Saturday, bringing them at 7 in the morning and keeping them till 6 at night. Like, she had her parents working with her. Like, to them, it was a godsend in their lives, like, who's this teacher telling me she's going to get my kids on track to college,
Okay. What about in the view of the Estonian Parents Association, or you personally, Aivar? Do you feel that Estonian teachers involve parents enough in the teaching of their children?
It's a good question. I think it's different it depends from school to school, and here I think the very important thing is at first to define for everybody, for parents, for pupils, for teachers, the meaning of word education. It's very different for everybody. Some people really means that this is a paper. There are a lot of people who think so. But the roots of this word from Latin, educare, bring up, educere, bring out. That's a very important meaning. And now the question is what to bring out, how to bring out. And then we will understand that we need time. We need time to find time and space to find out what to bring up and how to do that as parents, as teacher, there are much more than just one or two type of talents who have written Howard Gardner, yes. We know that at least 8 different talents we have to find. This is the most important task for parents, and together with school we can do it much better, because teachers are professionals. Parents are not. We don't have any topic how to be parent. I don't know, maybe you have or have had.
There's actually
I didn't.
There's actually a small program which had a conference in Tartu, I believe, about educating parents how to help their kids in school, which is quite a challenging thing to do. Many parents do this. I know my parents did this with me. They helped me study and so on. But it seems to me, from my experience in school, that there's not much involvement in the kids' studies nowadays, but other than parent-teacher meetings. Yeah?
Latin has been used here, so I will bring in another Latin term, and that is in loco parentis, which means that teacher is instead of parents while the child is in school. Every school operates within a community, and this is the responsibility of the school to reach out to the community. If you work out a vision which would not address the community, the aspirations in that community, obviously you're not going to succeed in educating the children for life. And talking about whose responsibility and what to do and how to change, the question is, it's about mindsetting. You can take today the utmost vision, learning, lifelong learning, and what is needed today in a very rapidly changing world is the skills which would help you transfer from one job to another, from one situation to another, something which we even don't know today to take place in 15, 20 years. So it's not about knowing the facts, although facts are important, but knowing what to do with them and how to cope, how to re-educate yourself, out-educate if necessary, and educate again. And this is the responsibility of the leadership of the school, this is the responsibility of the leadership in the classroom, and that's the teacher. And one more responsibility for the school today, talking about transformation education, is to reach out to the parents, help them educate together with the child in a totally different environment where they were educated 20, 30, 40 years ago.
The one thing maybe that I would add is about just positivity and creating these like positive virtual circles. Again, like when I think about it, the most amazing teachers that I've seen over the past few years when I've been in this work, they're the ones that somehow get the kids to believe in themselves and get the parents to believe in their kids in a way that they didn't do before. So when you think about some of the kids that I think have been like most challenging for many teachers, for many of these kids and their parents who are get bad marks, like their communication with the school normally is like their parents they're invited to the school to solve problems like your kid doesn't behave or like won't let other kids learn in their class. But what I think I've seen some of the best teachers do is really to find the good things that they're doing and really basically make a big deal out of it for the kids and for the parents. There was this one teacher in Berlin who told me that he had a student that for basically half a year hadn't done a single homework or assignment that he was asked to do. So he didn't do anything in the lessons. And finally, the thing that basically sort of made a difference there was that the teacher realized that basically he said, like, if you're gonna get like at least 50% in one of these tests, that I'm gonna write a letter to your dad. And so when he finally did, and the dad got the letter, I mean, they were just so full of joy, and it gave such a big like boost to the parent as well as the child. And just a similar another story. I was so we Teach for India is one of the partner organizations of Teach for All, and we had a big event there just a couple of months ago, and I was in a classroom that basically had no resources whatsoever. So I mean, if you imagine a classroom that only has blackboard and chalk, I mean, they didn't even have money for making photocopies, and they didn't have books. I mean, it was an under-resourced classroom as much you can really imagine it. And in this classroom, what was going on was just incredible. So the teacher was a second year teacher, but he was teaching them for the first year, so he had been with the students for 7 months. At the start of the year, they spoke no English at all, and when I went to the classroom, one of the tasks was called Just a Minute. So the kid had to go to the middle of the class and then had to basically speak in English for 1 minute on any given topic that he liked to do. And then one of the kids, who was one of the tiniest in the class, basically spoke there for like 25 or 30 seconds and then just ran out of words. And then for the rest of the minute, he just stood there, like he had his hands like this, and he just stood there and couldn't say anything. And then at the end of it, like, the other kids gave him feedback, and the teacher made such a big celebration out of it, and I didn't understand. And then when the teacher explained it, that you remember, like a month ago, the same kid was there, he also stood there, he couldn't say a word, and he started, like, tears came to his eyes, he started crying. So he was making such a big celebration out of the fact that over the past month, the kid had made such a big progress. And so I think that's something that I think we've seen some of the best teachers do in all these different countries, is just giving them the self-confidence and the self-belief, and really building on top of that, and I think making their parents believe in their kids in ways that they didn't do before as well.
We've definitely had some similar experiences with Noored Kooli teachers. I know I've heard, but I'm not going to share them right now because we're kind of low on time. But I actually had a small poster saying positive reinforcements on one of the speakers on my teacher's desk, so I don't forget. It seems to me that teachers often do forget in Estonia. But I would like to move on to our second point of order now, is even if we have teachers doing a great job in the classrooms, how do we make sure that schools as organizations work to foster those good teachers, teaching well, and foster relations between teachers and sharing materials and so on? Marko, how do you do it in your school? I mean, you are a head teacher. Do you share materials with your teachers? Do they share materials amongst themselves? Do they work together?
Can I be honest?
Yeah, please.
Then I would like to actually bypass your question. I think, in a way, I would like to come back to what people were saying before, Mr. Halle especially mentioning the meaning of education. I think there are two strands of the story. It's like, let's say, a bird or an airplane with two wings. I think one wing, we could say, is the method, it's the technique. It's what you're asking, actually, right? How you pass on the materials, how you make the organization work, how we motivate our students, how we set the standards, how we set the goals. I think you have to have another wing, and that wing is the meaning of education, what you brought up. It's what the content of education is. I think we can be here and talk for hours about the technique and about methods, and completely miss the goal for our community. During my academic research, I happened to look into the educational system in Germany during the 1930s. It was a very efficient system. It completely, well, not completely, but to a very high point, it actually realized the aims and the goals set by the national curriculum. For instance, in math class,